Thank you for being here tonight. I know that we've got a relatively small group here right now, so we don't need to be super formal, but I just wanted to at least do a some quick introductions and a little bit of background on where we are right now in the process. So thank you for being here. This is our first public outreach session for the Open Space and Recreation Plan update. It's a 7-year document, and it'll be a guiding document, much like the master plan or the strategic plan for the town. It's a really important resource as we move forward for both our open space and conservation areas, as well as our active recreation sites. So if you all don't know me yet, we're also broadcasting this at home. So if you all don't know me, I'm Jennifer Miller. I'm the Conservation Director.
Hi, I'm Jen Kirkland, the Recreation Director.
And then we also have with us tonight, we have our consultant from UMass Amherst at the Center for Resilient Metro Regions. We have Wayne Fiden, the director, and some of his team here as well. Basically, what we're looking to do tonight is to start the public outreach process and gather input on those unique and special places that are here in Westborough that you feel are important to either preserve or that we've already preserved and want to see more amenities or facilities added to. Wayne's going to go into a little bit more detail, and then the idea is that we'll be soliciting your input and hosting more sessions as we get further along in the process.
Thank you very much. So we will be informal. We're going to formally do it on mics, so when you speak, we're going to pass out little portable mics just so it shows up on the public access TV. So I'm just going to do, I think I have 7 slides, so that my presentation is not that long, but I just want to give a little bit of background. Most of you who are here have been involved with the process for years and understand this, but the state doesn't require towns to do open space and recreation plans, but it strongly encourages them, and you're only eligible for a lot of state grant programs when you have an open space grant. And then there's other grant programs where it's not required, but it's strongly encouraged. So like self-help funds, land and water that comes through the state, park grants, you need to have, I'm sorry, self-help is now called land, but you need to have an open space plan. Things like the Mass Office of Disabilities grants, which are a separate process, no requirement whatsoever to an open space plan. But things in the open space plan give more teeth and more strength. So it's useful to have, and it's obviously most important to help the town think about their priorities. You have done some amazing, both amazing acquisitions, amazing resource protection, amazing facilities, and you've done some really good planning over the years. We're going to be looking at all that and trying to build on that material. For tonight only, we're sort of doing what's called blue sky, right? We want any ideas, and we're not constrained by what the previous plan said. It's just a way to sort of reset everything and make sure we're not forgetting something in the plan. And then, you know, tomorrow morning we open up and look at the old plans. We'll be working with the committees who are involved. We'll be coming back to the community later. So we'll be building on years of knowledge. But we're just looking at what are some of the opportunities. So, you know, I've only been here 4 times. So you all know Westborough a lot more than I do. I'm just beginning to learn it. What I bring is sort of an expertise on the state process and the planning. You all know everything about open space and recreation far more than I do. I just wanted to find one term so we're on the same thing. Open space to people means 2 different things. Some people think of open space as being, it's open, right? There's no trees, there's no anything that's there, or it's open space as in it's not developed today. For the purpose of this plan, we're really talking about open space. Think of this as being conservation land. So we're thinking about conservation land, park land, recreation land, trails. We care about all those things. And then the other thing, not surprisingly, this is Westborough's plan. You guys are in the driver's seat. So most of what we're talking about is land that Westborough may own or have less than fee interest, so a restriction on it. But maybe not for those of you in the room, but for the public, they don't care who owns the property. They don't care if it's state, if it's land trust, if it's town, if it's federal, I don't know who else is out there. So we at least want to look at all the open space in town, whoever owns it, even though obviously the town's not going to spend a lot of money on probably not going to spend any money on state property. But we want to know what's out there. And in particular, there are places where your land touches state land. And so having those conversations become really important. And so so everything's fair game for this process. Again, you have incredible resources on playgrounds and recreation, and now soon to be indoor recreation and conservation property, and all of it is really good. But there's certainly always going to be room for opportunity. So I'll just give one example on this opening slide. I love that trail right there. I love that bench, right? I will hang out on that bench and have my lunch there. It's not accessible for someone in a wheelchair. It's not accessible for somebody with a rollator because it's set back, right? So, and not everything's going to be accessible. Most of your conservation areas are not going to be accessible. But if you have a bench that's 10 feet from asphalt, it would have been so simple to have that bench next to it. So we're always going to be looking, you could spend millions and millions of dollars for the entire world to be accessible. That's not possible. We're always going to be looking at low-hanging fruit for everything. What are the things that you can do? So that's sort of the goal. For the people here, I think you've already done this exercise. If anybody hasn't, I want you to do it. But 7 years ago, the town mapped unique features. So these are unique, typically natural features, hilltops, if you had them, waterfalls, anything that's unique. I tend to use this as the term I like is places of the heart. What are places that are really special? If I'm an outsider coming in to visit you, where would you take me for a walk? And so I think you've all come to the board, but if you haven't, come to the board before you leave and then work with Amelia and she'll put a little dot on what the spot is. Because again, we want to think about that. Are those lands protected? Should they be priorities? And so that just helps us go forward in the plan. Again, not surprising, you have incredible land resources of all types. But one of the things I'm going to ask you is, are there any classes of land you don't have? And so I'll give you an example. I used to be planning director in Northampton for many years. And so this is one of my experiences. We had community gardens. We had, I think, 800 plots of community gardens, enough for everybody in town who wanted community gardens. But we discovered, Northampton has a lot of poverty, we discovered that all our community gardens were really loved and beloved by people who had cars to get there. But it didn't serve some of the people who live in public housing projects and affordable housing. So we began an effort to say, well, let's have mini community gardens right where people live who might be able to walk there. Again, that doesn't apply to you, but that's the sort of thing I'm trying to think about. You have this incredible resources. Are there particular gaps in terms of serving a certain population or certain protected area? One of the gentlemen talked about where there's a place that pre-European contact Indians had temporary encampments, right? That's a sort of a special kind of place. So we're looking for those kinds of things. So I'm just going to go through these slides, but then we're going to come up to the board and say, are there other places, and we're going to use markers just to write right on top of here, are there other places that the town should be protecting in some form or other? Town ownership, land trust ownership, private land that's open to the public, whatever it is. And if it's specific land, please circle that land. If it's a class of things, some place that, whatever, tell us about that as well. So that's what that chart's going to be. I've already mentioned this, so the first step we did over the summer is the most technical step. So the states had open space plans for, 40, 50 years. It used to be to do them every 5 years. They kept adding to the burden of the open space plans. They get more technical. In return for that, they now make it a 7-year approval process. But one of the areas they've gotten most aggressive about is inventorying accessibility needs. There's not a mandate to do anything about it. That's up to the town, what you do. But there is a mandate to at least have the information. So that was the first thing that we did. We did that over summer. I had an intern who did a lot of field work. I came out a couple of times. And so we think through all the parcels of land and identified where they are. Now it goes to your disability committee and your ADA coordinator to get their comments, and then we'll incorporate that in the plan. And like everything else, you have probably more opportunities than most towns that I've worked in, for accessibility. Everything's not going to be accessible. Again, that low-hanging fruit. So the bottom left, that was a winter picture. So the toilet's not dirty like that during the summer. It is during the winter. But you pay the same price for getting an accessible toilet as a non-accessible toilet. It would be really frustrating if you came in a wheelchair because you couldn't reach the toilet paper in there. It's that kind of thing. You know, if you're getting a porta potty anyway, why not get one that has it? On the upper right, you see, you know, there's a bench which I can go underneath with my wheelchair. And that's great, so that's accessible. There's other tables in the same park which are totally surrounded by chairs that are fixed chairs, so they're not accessible. But it would be really easy to take out one chair per table, fixed chair, to leave. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. The bottom right is just a beach where the wind has blown the sand in, and that would make it really difficult for someone with a walker or a wheelchair to go over. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. And again, if you're interested, the accessibility is, I don't know, 40 pages, a long document. It will be an exhibit, an appendix to the plan with summaries of it brought into the plan. And then, you know, just generally want to think about facilities, whether it's the new indoor recreation or the playgrounds or, you know, improvements at conservation area. And again, you can guess, since I like exercises, then the next exercise, the last exercise we're going to do is just asking you, again, circling on the map, what are the areas that need improvements? So one gentleman came up before and said, well, here's a field by the high school that it should be better mowed so it doesn't grow up so people can do informal skiing there. You know, whatever those things are. Again, we're looking at big ticket items that may or may not ever happen, and we're looking at small things in the process. So that's the overview. I sort of want to stop now and sort of any global questions, any global comments, and then I'm going to ask you to come up to the board. So, okay. Anybody want to start us off? I can turn this towards.
I was going to say maybe one of these.
But if you could just introduce yourself for the record.
Any sort of comments go, you know, we want to talk to all of you individually.
I'm Mark Silverberg, and I'm on
Microphone, please.
They don't work. For this.
my question. Is that one working?
I'll just repeat the question. So the question is, will we identify funding sources? So the answer is yes. We will certainly identify all the grants that are out there. Oh, thank you. So we're certainly, the question about identifying funding sources, we identify all the grants that are out there. The easiest one is the grants that are dedicated to open space or to recreation, and then we identify the grants that are crossover grants. So Mass Office of Disabilities Municipal ADA grant, or, you know, MassDOT Shared Streets grant can actually in some ways help with streetscapes. So we identify those sort of crossover pieces, obviously CPA, obviously local bonding. So we're trying to identify those. There is one thing which we don't put into the plan, but we all know this. The state certainly knows this. I've spoken on panels with the state. A plan is a funny thing, frankly. On the one hand, we really want this to be empowering you, help you come together as a community consensus, and help you really plan for what your priorities are. On the other hand, owner X, who might have been the 10th most important parcel to buy, comes before you and says, hey, I'll sell this property to you at 50 cents on the dollar, and you want to apply for grants for the 50 cents. You don't really want to put in a grant application. This was 10th in our list. So that's the part we fudge a little bit. So we want to help you set your priorities, but we also want to make it, frankly, that whatever you apply for, you're ultimately going to decide what you apply for grants for. And your priorities may change over the next 7 years. Opportunities may come up. So we want to strengthen your hand. So that's the only part I'm going to be a little bit cautious about, is I want to make sure that, it's to make them cry. If you apply for a grant, I want the grant funder to cry for that process. Does that answer it?
It does.
Okay. And the other thing, you also, I've been talking about the open space. On the regulatory side, we're just beginning to look into that. You have good incentives for open space towards your regulatory system, but we're also going to look at that. There may always be more. Like you, for example, have measures that encourage someone doing a subdivision to do the generic term as a cluster. But I don't think, maybe I'm missing this, I've seen places, and I've written code, that says if you give us this land, you can count the land as if you own it for zoning purposes forever. Because you see people who say, hey, I'm willing to give you a strip of land, but then my property would no longer comply with zoning. So maybe I want to get some credit so I can count. So it's that kind of level analysis we're going to look at and try to see if we can do things. And that's, I just say that because that's not quite funding, but it's a way to get to yes in the process. That's okay. Other comments? And until the mic is fixed, I'll just repeat any questions. Or come up if you have a long statement. Yeah, come up or repeat it. Yeah.
Don Byrne, the PA Planners Road. I've worked on several of the open space plans, and one thing that I always regretted that we did not do.
John, do you mind to speak just for the TV? You can speak in here. Thank you.
One thing I regretted we didn't do in the past was have anything that indicated where the open space in adjacent towns abutted Westborough, because the larger parcels, the connections, are of incredible value.
Yep.
And we don't have any, if you don't have it on a map somewhere or something, we don't have a way to plan to prioritize those.
So good news, the state now requires you to show it. It's not in the level of detail. So you have really good GIS. The state requires you to do it just based on what's called Mass GIS, Mass Mapper. But we will show what all those parcels are around you.
The other comment I'll make is, as somebody who does do GIS, I can state, and as being one of the people who runs a committee for the Westborough Community Land Trust, I can state that at least the Westborough Community Land Trust properties, there's not a single one that has the right information in GIS for the state, including the fact that until the last update, they didn't even have the trust name right for the last 5 years. And it took me 5 years to get it straightened out. So the town could help, because I think they get a little more hold in the...
Okay, so that won't be, fixing that won't be something we do, but identifying as being an action item.
Yeah.
The state, I don't know where Westborough is on it, the state has asked communities to give them their cadastral data, their ownership data, so every parcel that Westborough has, they've probably delivered to the state, so that starts helping.
They've named them all with names, some of which were never used and have never been identified for the property, and yet they have those names.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Same with the trails. They have a trail map that has nothing to do with reality, including routes people on private property, and we get the phone calls.
Okay, that's very helpful. Incidentally, in case you don't, this is just in the weeds on one particular item. MAPC got Mass Trails grant recently, and their goal is to clean up their, so Mass GIS relies on MAPC for their trail layer, and MAPC got funding. I don't know where they are in the process, but hopefully, crossing my fingers, the MAPC data layer, which is available, is going to get better and better in the process. I know they're going statewide. That doesn't help you, but they're also improving the quality. So, other comments from anybody? Okay, so again, the next thing I'm going to ask is if we can go back. So if you left out any of the places for the heart, let's mark it up on this map. If you're ready to move on to the next one, on the other map that's there, so this is the one on the left, and Amelia will be our marker, work with here and tell us what parcels of land should you protect in some form or other. And if it's not parcel specific, she can just make a note on the side, parcels that have thus and such, wetlands. And so that's one of the ways we make things compelling for a grant application is we identify specific parcels, and then we identify things that are important. Anything that's a mountaintop, anything that's a wetlands, anything that's a connecting trail is important. Because literally when you apply for a grant, the state wants to know where in the open space plan is it, and the more it's mentioned in the plan, the better it is. So the plan is going to be a little bit repetitive. So, right, does that make sense? So go up to Amelia and start circling the parcels we should protect, and why, and put arrows in for what it is.
There's a parcel here off of West Main Street. It's actually 3 separate parcels under one ownership. I'm guessing 60 acres or so that I'd like to see protected. And then there's a separate Chapter 61 parcel that abuts it under a separate ownership. Those are all very close to Veterans Freedom Park, very close to downtown. And the other one I'd like to see protected is off of Adams Street, Fay Mountain, which is a well-known landmark in town. And that is, I don't have my glasses, sorry.
I can note. I just
Yeah, I think it's this one, if I had to guess.
Is it FAY?
Yeah. FAY, yeah. This yellow one here. Yeah.
Thank you. Go make Don stand up. Yeah, absolutely. Go up with Amelia.
I'll use this one. Sure.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Fenton. I live at 52 Ruggles Street, which is straightaway right field to the high school baseball field. My concern is for what we used to refer to as Round Top Hill. Prior to 1985, there was a ski tow and lights on the hill. Hurricane Gloria took care of that in 1985, and no one has really skied there since. After the doubling of the high school in 2004, the high school took over the maintaining of the ski hill. And until that time, the town of Westborough, the DPW, did a fabulous job keeping it wide open and cut a couple of times a year with their heavy equipment. What's happened now over the past 15 years is that the hill is shrinking from left and right with trees and bushes quickly approaching where it is now about half as wide as it used to be. I consider this precious open space. To those of us in the neighborhood, even to the high school, even to anybody driving by, it's a beautiful, unabated hill. It's actually larger and higher than Ward Hill, the ski area over in Shrewsbury. And to watch it shrink when I come out of my house every day, I have to come out and ask for some help. I need somebody to say, you know, we'll take on that project, or we'll see what we can do, or I have an idea. That's why I'm here. I'm here to try to save that hill. And I am speaking on behalf of all of the neighbors who appreciate the deer and the turkeys and the kids sliding in the winter. And it's just a wonderful piece of property that is being ignored. I also want to say that the landscaping company that does the work for the school department, JB, they're doing their best. They are a good company. They're taking great care of the property. But with their equipment, it's kind of dangerous to cut that hill. And even though it is, they're trying. So I guess what I'm saying is, who's got the big equipment, who has the interest, and who wants to try to save that beautiful piece of open space? Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dennis. Anybody else want to come up? Want to come up? Or you're...
Mine is add a couple more unique features.
Okay.
I was hoping to add a couple more unique features to the map. There's down on the Arnold, what was the old Arnold property, which is in this area, there was a road that the Arnolds claimed had been at least 200 years old, and there is a cut where you're about 15 to 20 feet down from the hill that you could tell was pickaxed through the hill. And this old straight road goes through there that doesn't go anywhere anymore, but it's just sort of unique because we don't have any signature places where you see the really old roads from, and the Arnolds claimed it was, by now it'd be 200 years old at the time when they had shown the property to us. And that's down on Lackey Street? It's down on Lackey. It's over, you know, actually close to the Hopkinton line, and I've never explored the whole way because they showed me the piece, and I've respected them in the past and never got on the property without their permission and never had a chance to get back there again.
Great. Thank you.
There was one other one I was trying to think of. For the moment, I'll stop, and I'm sure I'll think of it.
You want to, do you have anything to add?
Well,
Put you in the
actually,
spot.
my name is Rich Catravone. I'm a new person here in town. Thank you. Do I really need this? I don't think I do, but that's okay. I'm new in town. I'm really here to learn. We have a large 55-plus community off of Lyman Street. We have a lot of people there that are walkers. We have an environmental club. We also have a lot of people who would like to see and learn about the resources that we have here in town. We're going to become an integral part of this community, and we would like to put something back in. So I'm really here just to learn tonight.
Okay.
Thank
that's
you.
great. Okay, this is really helpful. We don't leave though. We still have 2 more exercises for you. So, yeah, of course.
So one question that I have, kind of piggybacking on the last 2 slides, is, especially being relatively new still to the town, is, are there places that are already in use, whether it's active recreation or passive recreation, or that the town has but doesn't have public access to yet, that you would still say are places of the heart that could use more showcasing, or you know, need further development? And maybe that kind of starts to get into your facilities aspect, but I think that's an important piece for us to understand too, for Jen and I in particular, is where do you see a need for additional, I'll say, development, meaning potential trails, staging areas, better connection to certain landmarks within these properties, or additional maybe landmarks or features at some of the recreation facilities.
Yeah, that's perfect. So it's perfect. This exercise now is just sort of anything that would help for facilities. But I think Jennifer's right. We're not just talking about like new ball fields. It's trails or parking or trail signs or wayfinding.
Yeah, so I think one of the trophy pieces in town that's underutilized is Veterans Freedom Park. I really think that there's a potential there because it's close. It's very centrally located. It's walkable from most of the schools, not all the schools, but and it's essentially, it's got a beautiful view of Mill Pond, but it's essentially just a large pasture. A couple of tennis courts, but I feel like the town has an opportunity to do more active recreation there. Again, funding is always an issue, though. So, how do we get from point A to point, Z? We need a roadmap for that. So
That's great. Thank you. Other thoughts for facilities in general, improvements, programmatic improvements?
the other thing I've been kind of advocating for at Bay State Commons is a skating rink. And my hope was that we could collaborate with the rink on Oak Street and somehow have them, run it for the town. And again, I just think something that's down. The other thing might be a skating, like a skateboard park. I think we're short of that. And then the last thing might be, and again, Jen, you might know better than I know they were offering some boat rentals at one point at Chauncey. Yeah, I thought, like sailboat lessons and boating and maybe even a snack bar up there because, when soccer's going full swing, there's opportunities there that, again, I don't want people to not come downtown and have lunch, but, I do remember having little kids looking for a snack and wishing there was something up there, so.
Can I ask just one question, the skating part? So skating, you probably know, people love ice, water that's frozen. But I'm seeing a big growth in this artificial media plastic. It's nothing like seeing people skate in Oklahoma City when it's 80 degrees out there. What are you thinking about? Actual skating with real water or?
Well, you're in New England. We're not, people want ice skates, I think.
Yep.
So, but my hope, and there was some talk at one point about a splash pad down there, and I was kind of hoping that we could do a concrete splash pad with removable fixtures, so that we could lay down a rink in the winter, but it would have to be, it wouldn't be cheap. It would have to be a chilled rink. I don't think,
Yeah.
I think we'd have to, again, I would hope we could do some type of collaboration with the rink on Oak Street, where they could rent the skates and manage it and just use the town land. But it's just a concept.
That's great. Thank you.
Putting on another one of my hats, I'm on the board of the organization for the Assabet Sudbury and Concord Rivers. And I know on the Bewald plan, we're trying to call for putting a canoe launch at the place where it crosses the river if we can, because that, where the Assabet River, because that is actually the place where it's got enough flow, you can always paddle from there down. and there's enough space in the general area that you can have enough parking spaces, because if you're paddling a river, it's typically 2 cars or more, so that you can shuttle and do things, and you need some space. The other one is harder, but I'd love to see, but this would be a question for conservation. The state multiple times in the past has gone out on the old road out into the cedar swamp and actually knocked down the vegetation right by Cedar Swamp Pond to push a boat in from the road. And I'd love to see a formal launch there, but it is a question, it's a sensitive, delicate area, and I recognize it. The other thing on that is that I still think that the old road and the Bay State land, if we can figure out some way about the pollution that is back there, is a wonderful place, because much of the year you can actually walk all the way to 495 in the swamp, in the middle of the swamp. And I've explored back there, and it's a rather unique being in there. And also, since it would be historical, because that whole swamp area was I forget how many BC, was human habitation. It's the earliest human habitation in Massachusetts that they've been able to do archaeological digs on. So it's a special area that I think we should consider more. And I've explored it from all different ways into the swamp, but I don't recommend most people go in. There are multiple peat bogs that if you step in, you will not be seen again, and other things, and you need to know what you're doing.
That's great. Thank you. So let me ask you the last question. So the part that's actually nice about there not being a lot of people here is we've been able to go into great depth. One of the things that Westborough asked us to do as part of this project is have this public forum to hear from people and go in the weeds, but then do a townwide survey, which obviously necessitating a survey, we don't go in nearly as much detail, but we get a much bigger sample size. What are the questions we should be asking? I mean, we're going to ask obvious things. What do people need? Do they need more ball fields? Do they need more walking trails? That stuff we get, but there are other questions that aren't going to be obvious to me as an outsider that you'd like to know, is there community support for or not?
So the town recently passed CPA, and I guess, you're allowed to spend those funds on 3 things. And
4 things.
Oh, 4 things, my mistake. But, a certain percentage has to be spent, but then there's a large chunk of that can be spent on one of those 4. So I guess what I would like to know is what people want us to use that money for the most. Is it historic preservation? Is it affordable housing? Is it open space? Is it recreation? What are the, and I'm not on that committee, but I think that committee needs to know when a project comes forward, if they should save the money. I looked at that money as savings for the future for big projects, and I just don't want to see that money get spent every year and not have it. I'd like to see it stockpile, I guess, so that when we do get one of these big, expensive items, we don't have to go and ask the town to raise and appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts for useful questions? Okay, and I guess the final question is there anything we didn't ask you that you want to tell us? Is there anything we didn't ask you that you want to tell us that we left out in the process? And to be clear, you're going to have more opportunities. You're going to get the survey. You can send email to Jen, Jennifer, or me and your comments. It's our goal to record, it's going to be up to the town what their priorities are. That's not my role. But it's our goal to have an exhibit in the plan that sort of documents everything we heard and then sort of responses to it. So if you don't think of something today, go home and then email me later. But any last thoughts before we close? Anything you want to, either one of you want to ask?
I was just going to add in that even though we have a relatively small participation tonight, we will be doing more public outreach sessions as we get further along in the process. And then in a couple weeks, we'll be meeting with various stakeholder groups as well, which will include Recreation Committee, some of the individual leagues, Conservation Commission, Open Space Preservation Committee, WCLT, we'll certainly invite SVT as well. We're really asking for 1 to 2 members from each group to be here so that we can get a good sense of, from the stakeholder groups, where there are, similar to the questions we went through tonight, but where there are needs, where there are, that are unmet, any gaps, and then if there are not only places that you feel still need to be preserved, or prioritized, but also within those spaces that we already have what we need to develop further.
Okay, with that, we'll close. Do you want to add anything? Or you're,
No, that's
okay.
great.
Okay, with that, I'll close and thank you so much for coming and hopefully see you more in the process.
If